Hello. Don't forget to like and subscribe before starting the video. Who is Martin Van Buren? Martin Van Buren was born on December 5, 1782, in Kinderhook, New York, to Dutch immigrant parents. His father owned a tavern and was involved in local politics, which likely influenced Van Buren's interest in public service from a young age. After attending local schools and briefly studying law, Van Buren was admitted to the New York bar in 1803. Van Buren quickly became involved in New York politics, serving as a state senator from 1813 to 1820 and as Attorney General of the state from 1815 to 1819. He later served as governor of New York from 1829 to 1832 before being appointed Secretary of State by President Andrew Jackson. Van Buren's political rise was aided by his involvement with the Albany Regency, a powerful political machine in New York that helped to control state politics. This group of politicians and party leaders supported Van Buren and helped him to rise to prominence in state and national politics. As the 8th President of the United States, Van Buren faced a number of challenges, including an economic crisis that led to the Panic of 1837. Despite these difficulties, Van Buren is remembered for his contributions to the development of the modern Democratic Party and his efforts to expand democracy and protect individual rights. Martin Van Buren's early career in politics began when he was elected to the New York State Senate in 1813. He quickly became known as a skilled politician, and he was instrumental in establishing the Bucktail faction of the Democratic-Republican Party in the state. This faction was opposed to the more conservative Clintonians, who controlled the state government at the time. Van Buren's political ambitions continued to grow, and in 1815 he was appointed Attorney General of New York by Governor Daniel D. Tompkins. As Attorney General, Van Buren worked to strengthen the Democratic-Republican Party in the state and to promote the interests of the Bucktail faction. In 1821, Van Buren was elected to the United States Senate, where he continued to champion the cause of the Democratic-Republican Party. He served in the Senate until 1828, when he resigned to become governor of New York. As governor, Van Buren continued to work closely with the Bucktail faction and with his political allies in the Albany Regency. This group of politicians and party leaders, which included figures like William L. Marcy and Silas Wright, was a powerful force in New York politics, and it helped Van Buren to rise to prominence both in the state and in the National Democratic Party. Van Buren's leadership in the Albany Regency helped to shape the political landscape of New York and to establish a model for the type of political machine that would become common in American politics. The Regency was known for its skill in organizing voters and influencing elections, and it played a major role in Van Buren's later political successes. Overall, Van Buren's early career was characterized by his skillful use of political organizations and his ability to build coalitions in support of his goals. Andrew Jackson in 1829. As Secretary of State, Van Buren worked closely with Jackson to implement his agenda, which included a focus on expanding democracy and promoting the interests of the common people. One of Van Buren's most important contributions to national politics was his role in the founding of the Democratic Party. In the wake of the divisive 1824 presidential election, which saw John Quincy Adams become president despite losing the popular vote, Van Buren and his allies worked to create a new political party that would represent the interests of the common people. The new Democratic Party was founded in 1828, and it helped to propel Jackson to victory in the presidential election that same year. Van Buren played a key role in organizing the party and in building support for Jackson's candidacy, and he was rewarded for his efforts with the position of vice president. One of the most controversial moments of Van Buren's career came during the Bank War of 1832. This conflict arose when Jackson, who was deeply suspicious of the power of banks, vetoed a bill to recharter the Second Bank of the United States. This move was widely unpopular among the business and financial interests of the country, and it led to a bitter political battle between Jackson and his opponents. Van Buren played a key role in supporting Jackson during the Bank War, helping to organize political support for the president and working to ensure that his policies were implemented. Despite facing fierce opposition, Jackson ultimately succeeded in dismantling the Second Bank of the United States, a move that was seen as a major victory for the forces of democracy and populism. Overall, Van Buren's contributions to national politics were significant, and his role in helping to found the Democratic Party and in supporting Jackson's agenda helped to shape the course of American politics in the decades that followed. In the presidential election of 1836, Martin Van Buren was the Democratic Party's nominee, running against several Whig Party candidates. Van Buren campaigned on a platform of continuing Jackson's policies and promoting the interests of the common people. He emphasized the importance of limited government, states' rights, and the need for a sound national currency. Van Buren's opponents in the election included William Henry Harrison, Daniel Webster, and Hugh Lawson White, among others. However, Van Buren's strong support from the Democratic Party and his skillful campaign strategy helped him to secure a decisive victory, winning the majority of the electoral votes and carrying 15 of the 26 states. However, Van Buren's presidency was immediately faced with significant economic challenges, including the Panic of 1837, which was triggered by a series of bank failures and economic downturns. The panic caused widespread unemployment, bankruptcies, and a sharp decline in economic activity. Van Buren's response to the crisis was controversial, and his policies were criticized by many as ineffective and inadequate. Despite the difficulties he faced during his presidency, Van Buren continued to champion the cause of limited government and states' rights. He worked to promote policies that would support the interests of the common people and protect the nation's economic interests. While his time in office was marked by significant challenges, Van Buren's contributions to American politics and his commitment to democratic ideals helped to shape the course of the nation's history. Martin Van Buren's presidency was marked by significant challenges, including the economic crisis that emerged shortly after he took office. In response to the Panic of 1837, Van Buren proposed a number of policies designed to stabilize the economy and protect the interests of the common people. One of his most significant initiatives was the independent treasury system, which aimed to protect the government's finances from the volatility of private banks. Under this system, the government would establish its own system of banks to manage its finances, rather than relying on private banks. This system was controversial and faced significant opposition, but it ultimately helped to stabilize the government's finances and lay the foundation for the modern American banking system. In addition to his economic policies, Van Buren also pursued a number of initiatives related to foreign policy. One of his most notable actions was his handling of the Amistad case, which involved a group of African slaves who had taken control of a Spanish ship and attempted to sail it back to Africa. Van Buren worked to ensure that the slaves were granted their freedom and were able to return to their home country, despite opposition from some members of his administration. Van Buren also worked to maintain peaceful relations with Great Britain, which was an important trading partner for the United States. He successfully negotiated several important treaties with the British government, including the Webster-Ashburton Treaty of 1842, which helped to resolve several long-standing border disputes between the two countries. Despite his efforts to address the challenges facing the nation, Van Buren's presidency was marked by significant criticism and opposition. Many Americans blamed him for the economic crisis and accused him of being out of touch with the needs of the people. In the election of 1840, he was defeated by William Henry Harrison, who ran on a platform of promoting economic growth and expansion. Overall, Van Buren's presidency was a tumultuous period in American history, marked by economic challenges, political turmoil, and significant foreign policy issues. Despite these difficulties, Van Buren remained committed to the principles of democracy and states' rights, and his contributions to American politics helped to shape the course of the nation's history. Martin Van Buren's legacy has had a lasting impact on American politics and history. As one of the founders of the Democratic Party, Van Buren played an instrumental role in shaping the party's ideology and political strategy. He helped to create a more populist and democratic political movement, which focused on the needs and concerns of the common people. Van Buren's commitment to expanding democracy and protecting individual rights was a key aspect of his political philosophy. He believed in the importance of states' rights and limited government, and worked to ensure that the federal government did not overstep its bounds. He was also a staunch advocate for free speech and press freedom, and worked to protect these fundamental rights during his presidency. Despite the challenges that he faced during his presidency, Van Buren's contributions to American politics and history are significant. He helped to shape the modern Democratic Party, and his commitment to democracy and individual rights remains an important legacy that continues to influence American politics today. In conclusion, Martin Van Buren's presidency was marked by significant challenges, including economic crisis and foreign policy issues. However, he also made important contributions to American politics, including his role in founding the Democratic Party and his efforts to expand democracy and protect individual rights. His legacy continues to shape American politics and society today, and his commitment to democracy and states' rights remains an important part of American political philosophy. Overall, Martin Van Buren's impact on American history is significant, and his contributions to the nation's political and social development are deserving of recognition and study. Thank you for watching this video. If you found it informative, please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more content like this in the future.